want to thank Dr. Ernest Kwamina Addison for his excellent remarks and for his contributions as chairman of the IMF's Board of Governors. Reflecting on the dramatic change in the world over the last year, I paid a visit to Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, where 44 men signed our Articles of Agreement in 1944. Our founders faced two massive tasks: to deal with the immediate devastation caused by the war and to lay the foundation for a more peaceful, more prosperous post-war world. At the conclusion of the conference, John Maynard Keynes captured the significance of international cooperation as hope for the world. If we can continue, the brotherhood of men will have become more than a phrase, he said. As we look forward to welcoming Andorra as our 190th member, the work of the IMF is testament to the values of cooperation and solidarity on which a sisterhood and brotherhood of humanity is built. Today, we face a new Bretton Woods moment, a pandemic that has already cost more than 1 million lives, an economic calamity that will make the world economy 4.4% smaller this year and strip an estimated 11 trillion of output by next year. An untold human desperation in the face of huge disruption, rising poverty for the first time in decades. Once again, we face two massive tasks: to fight the crisis today and build a better tomorrow. We know what action must be taken right now. A durable economic recovery is only possible if we beat the pandemic. Health measures must remain a priority. I urge you to support production and distribution of effective therapies and vaccines to ensure that all countries have access. I also urge you to continue support for workers and businesses until a durable exit from the health crisis. We have seen global fiscal actions of 12 trillion. Major central banks have expanded balance sheets by 7.5 trillion. These synchronized measures have prevented the destructive macro-financial feedback we saw in previous crises. But almost all countries are still hurting, especially emerging market and developing economies. And while the global banking system entered the crisis with high capital and liquidity buffers, there is a weak tail of banks in many emerging markets. We must take measures to prevent the buildup of financial risks over the medium term. We face what I have called a long ascent for the global economy, a climb that will be difficult, uneven, uncertain, and prone to setbacks. But it is a climb up, and we will have a chance to address some persistent problems: low productivity, slow growth, high inequalities, a looming climate crisis. We can do better than build back the pre-pandemic world. We can build forward to a world that is more resilient, sustainable, and inclusive.
It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation, and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. We have a choice to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today: polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflicts. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset.
Now, let me first of all, of course, begin by wishing you all a Happy New Year. I guess it's still time to do that, given that we are just exactly halfway through between our Western New Year and the Lunar New Year, which will loom in a few weeks' time. I think it's also appropriate to wish ourselves a Happy New Year, given what I would like to talk to you about, which has to do with the global economy and what we should expect for 2014. Now, I'm going to test you numerology skills by asking you to think about the magic 7. Okay? Most of you will know that 7 is quite a number in all sorts of themes, religions, and I'm sure that you can compress numbers as well. So, if we think about 2014, all right, I'm just giving you 2014, you drop the 0, 14, 2 times 7. Okay, that's just by way of example, and we're going to carry on. So 2014 will be a milestone and hopefully a magic year in many respects.
We must seize this new Bretton Woods moment. How? I see 3 imperatives. First, the right economic policies. What was true at Bretton Woods remains true today. Prudent macroeconomic policies and strong institutions are critical for growth, for jobs, for improved living standards. One size does not fit all. Policies must be tailored to individual country needs. Support remains essential for some time. Withdrawing it too early risks grave and unwarranted economic harm. The stage of the crisis will determine the appropriate shape of this support, generally broader early on and more targeted as countries begin to recover. Strong medium-term frameworks for monetary, fiscal, and financial policies, as well as reforms to boost trade, competitiveness, and productivity, can help create confidence for policy action now, while building much-needed resilience for the future. That includes keeping a careful watch on risks presented by elevated debt.
Unless it's more money than ever, being printed at a rate faster than ever by the world's largest money printer during the middle of a freak out. Then you don't follow the money, then you just freak out, right? Wrong. We're going to follow the money here. I'm talking about the Federal Reserve, and I'm talking about the Federal Reserve's balance sheet. Don't worry if you don't know what the balance sheet is. We are going to walk through it here. We are going to follow the money. Now, 2 weeks ago, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet was sitting at $4.3 trillion. It then added $360 billion to its balance sheet. Printed that money out of thin air. Don't get caught up on that. It is a bank of issue. That is what it does. It creates money from thin air just like commercial banks do, as we saw in my last video several eons ago. The Federal Reserve created $360 billion and added it to its balance sheet 2 weeks ago. It then turned around and printed another $590 billion and added that to its balance sheet. The 2-week total added to the balance sheet was $940 billion. The previous 2-week high, $510 billion during the height of the financial crisis after the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. So 510 was the old record. $940 billion has just been added to the balance sheet, which now sits at $5.254 trillion. The previous balance sheet high was $4.5 trillion. set back in 2015. It thus took the Federal Reserve 100 years to get to $4.5 trillion, and we have now blown past that record by 15 or 20% in the space of 2 weeks. Something is going on. I think even the casual observer would acknowledge that much. Now, the Fed says, and you know this is coming, right? The Fed says it has to do this because of the coronavirus. And the coronavirus has harmed Main Street, and the Fed needs to print up all this money and ease credit conditions in households and businesses. And that's why it's taking these unprecedented steps with regard to monetary policy on its balance sheet.
That includes keeping a careful watch on risks presented by elevated debt. We expect 2021 debt levels to go up significantly to around 125% of GDP in advanced economies, 65% of GDP in emerging markets, and 50% of GDP in low-income countries. The fund is providing debt relief to its poorest members, and with the World Bank, we support extension by the G20 of the debt service suspension initiative. Beyond this, where debt is unsustainable, it should be restructured without delay. We should move towards greater debt transparency and enhanced creditor coordination. I am encouraged by the G20 discussions on a common framework for sovereign debt resolution, as well as on our call for improving the architecture for sovereign debt resolution, including private sector participation. We are there for our member countries, supporting their policies.
Inclusion and equality.
Equal, inclusive, and sustainable.
Sustainable.
More inclusive.
More inclusive.
More inclusive. Financial inclusion.
Sustainable.
Equal footing.
Sustainable.
Equal.
Sustainably. Sustainable, a more sustainable path. More sustainable and more inclusive.
Sustainable.
A sustainable economy.
Sustainability.
More sustainable.
Sustainability, sustainable development goals.
Sustainable, more inclusive world. This must be for people. My second imperative. To reap the full benefits of sound economic policy, we must invest more in people. That means protecting the vulnerable. It also means boosting human and physical capital to underpin growth and resilience. COVID-19 has underscored the importance of strong health systems. Rising inequality and rapid technological change demands strong education and training systems to increase opportunity and reduce disparities. Accelerating gender equality can be a global game changer. For the most unequal countries, closing the gender gap could increase GDP by an average of 35%. And investing in our young people is investing in our future. They need access to health and education, and also access to the internet, because that gives them access to the digital economy, so critical for growth and development in the future. Expanding internet access in sub-Saharan Africa just by 10% of the population could increase real per capita GDP growth by as much as 4 percentage points. Digitalization also helps with financial inclusion as a powerful tool to help overcome poverty. Just as the pandemic has shown that we can no longer ignore health precautions, we can no longer afford to ignore climate change. My third imperative. We focus on climate change because it is macrocritical, posing profound threats to growth and prosperity. Because it is macrocritical, posing profound threats to growth and prosperity. It is also people critical and planet critical. In the last decade, direct damage from climate-related disasters adds up to around $1.3 trillion. If we don't like this health crisis, we will not like the climate crisis one iota. Our research shows that with the right mix of green investment and higher carbon prices, we can steer toward zero emissions by 2050, and we can help create millions of new jobs. We have a historic opportunity to build a greener world, also a more prosperous and job-rich one.
At the very least, the fourth industrial revolution will place the robber barons in between every human interaction. This gives the robber barons a fee for every interaction and the power to approve or deny every human interaction. It is every human's duty to prevent this infrastructure to gain government monopoly status and universal public acceptance, undermine everyone who is part of the robber baron class. If they sell eggs, smash them or make them unable to sell them. Keep them up at night. Let your dog urinate on their lawn, and so on and so on. Never surrender. Once you begin to fight back, your life will have meaning. Try a small gesture today and see how great it feels, or not. The choice is yours.
A prosperous and job-rich one. With low interest rates, the right investments today can yield a triple dividend tomorrow. Avert future losses, spur economic gains, save lives, and deliver social and environmental benefits for everyone. At the fund, we are working tirelessly to support a durable recovery and a resilient future as countries adapt to structural transformations brought on by climate change, by digital acceleration, and the rise of the knowledge economy. Since the pandemic began, we have committed over $100 billion, and we still have substantial resources from our $1 trillion in lending capacity. We will continue to pay special attention to the urgent needs of emerging market and low-income countries, especially small and fragile states, helping them to pay doctors and nurses and protect the most vulnerable people and parts of their economy. Our unprecedented action was only possible thanks to our members' generous support. The doubling of the new arrangements to borrow and a new round of bilateral borrowing arrangements preserves our much-needed financial firepower. Members also have stepped up with essential contributions to our catastrophe containment and relief and poverty reduction and growth trusts.
Is available from the World Economic Forum's website. I will, of course, throw the link into the show notes so that you can go and visit it yourself. And when you do, you will see that there is this spaghetti graph where all these different concepts are related to all these other different concepts, and it shows you the lines and how these different things affect each other. And around the node of COVID-19, you can see all of the different things that are directly and then indirectly influenced by this global crisis that we're living through. And in that inner circle, we see the media's role during COVID-19, response and recovery, COVID-19's workforce impact, avoiding COVID-19 infection and spread, finding a vaccine, COVID-19's impact on trade, COVID-19's impact on travel, and COVID-19's impact on financial markets. But then in the larger ring, you see all of these different areas that are in some way affected by these COVID-19 wrought transformations, like transformation of behavioral science, or inclusive design, international security, institutional investors, oil and gas, private investors, US, geopolitics, aerospace, Switzerland, migration, European Union. Again, going all the way around the circle into all of these other things, all the way over to corporate governance, internet governance, global health, global governance, human rights, values, all of these things. And this map shows you how all of these things are related. So you can click on any one of these nodes and you can see how it relates to all of the other nodes that it is connected to. And it will also bring up all of the information, all the different publications, videos, and data related to that node. So if you click on the media's role during COVID-19, you will see that it's connected to global governance and human rights and values and all of those things. And on the side, you'll see the different publications, the different mainstream, of course, World Economic Forum connected types of Scientific American and The Conversation and MIT Technology Review and these other publications that have been collected around that subject, And when you start, and I do suggest you, if you haven't done so, that you go to this page and just click around on it a little bit, just to get a sense of the scope and the scale of the transformation that's taking place here. And it is important to note that although some zero research YouTubers were initially putting out that this this entire COVID-19 transformation map was just created in the last month. And can you believe they did all this work in a month? This is clearly a coordinated agenda. Well, no, actually, this transformation map has been around since 2017. You can go to the World Economic Forum website and read about it. You can even watch their little YouTube video introducing transformation maps from 2017, where they showed all of this laid out. It's just that COVID-19, that particular node, has been added to this map, obviously, since this generated crisis came about. But this is just a large database, essentially, of articles and information that are being collected by the stooges of the World Economic Forum and thrown onto this map in the appropriate node. So it creates this gigantic spaghetti graph. But actually, that underlines the most important point of this, that this is a pre-existing agenda that they are now just slapping this Great Reset COVID-19 label on, which really doesn't in any way explain what is happening right now. What is happening is this transformation of, as we have just seen, everything imaginable: global governance, internet governance, health, security, geopolitics. All of these different things are right now being transformed, again, in the name of this COVID-19, but it doesn't matter. So we are not talking about a reset. We are talking about a transformation. And specifically, what kind of transformation? We are talking about a revolution.
This has allowed us to support our low-income members with debt relief and to triple our concessional lending. We are engaging with members to further boost our concessional lending capacity, to adapt our lending toolkit, and to increase support for capacity development. IMF staff, working day and night, have been magnificent in this crisis. My sincere thanks to them and to my management team. And my deep appreciation to our executive directors. They have been there every step of the way over the past 6 months.
This is an historic moment. We have, in this past year, made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. This is an historic moment. We have, in this past year, made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.